In this video, I want to show you how I created a cinematic, natural-looking frame with only one light. As filmmakers, especially with small budgets, we often have to work with small rooms, boring rooms, and without much gear. So here is how I handle it. I will talk about camera placement, exposing with limited light, lighting ratios, and I'll share one hack: what to do when you don't have a grid. The first thing I look for in a space like this are two things: depth and motivated light source. In this case, it was this corner with a window. Before I even sat the camera down, I knew I wanted to shoot into the shadow side of my face. This meant I'd be adding my key light from the left side of the frame to match the window. I'd love to tell you I placed the table there for a sophisticated foreground element, but in reality I just couldn't move it out of the frame, so we have to deal with it. Let's talk about how should I expose this. Since there's a window I can't control, you think I should expose for the highlights outside, right? Well, not in this case. If I expose for the window so it doesn't clip, the rest of the room becomes far too dark. Since I only have one light to raise the overall level of the entire scene, I'm going to let the window clip just a little bit. This next step is very important to me if I want to create a natural looking frame. So before adding my Nanlite 150, let's take a look what we already have in the room and what is happening with natural light. We can see this corner is darker than that area and this side of my face is brighter than the other. When I bring in the light, I want to mimic all of this natural fall-off that is already happening in the room, because this just feels more authentic to me. Another big factor for me is overall contrast. I always look for those bright and darker spots in the picture because to me they create much more interesting picture. It gives the frame the third dimension. Now let's add my trusty Nanlite. We can already see a problem. Although we gained a nice level on my face, we lost those dark spots from before. How can we reduce this spill? Well, usually with a grid, but I don't have one. So here's the trick. Feathering. Position the softbox so the main beam passes in front of the subject, hitting them only with the edge of the light. I think this looks much better, just look at the difference. Now the main source of light is going past me and hitting the wall out of frame rather than washing it out. Now let's talk about levels. I didn't have light meter on me, so I used false color from my monitor. In case you're not familiar with false color, don't worry, it's simpler than it looks. In this setup, I'm watching 4 areas: the window, the key side of my face, the shadow side, and the wall. Since I can't measure the exact stops of light without a light meter, I find it a lot more practical talking about IRE levels using false color, although my cheap monitor isn't the most accurate. Anyway, here is how I nailed the balance. If the window is at 90 IRE and even clipping a little, I want the key side of my face at around 65 IRE. To my eye, this makes sense because I'm sitting away from the window, so it should be brighter than me. Finally, to separate myself from the background, I need my face to be brighter than the wall. With my key side at 65 IRE and the wall sitting between 40 and 50 IRE, I get the separation that makes the subject pop from the frame. When I look at the image as a whole, these ratios just feel right. Even though technically my skin is a bit brighter than it should be, for my skin tone, I'm okay with that. Because the window is clipping and the extra brightness feels natural, it just makes sense visually. Like I said before, sometimes when you're working with limited budgets, or in my case with just one light, you have to make some compromises. Even though I don't think this was a compromise, it was more or less of a stylistic choice, to go a bit brighter on my skin, because just makes sense to me. So here it is, and as I said earlier, I'm always looking for depth and contrast, for bright and dark spots, and in rooms that are boring, that are small, I think that this is even more important. What do you think? Would you have done something differently? Let me know down in the comments. Thank you for watching, and bye.